Canva, and there's a few ways you can go about setting up your design. You can search for the Facebook cover, the search engine. You can use your custom design and pay attention to what measurements you are using. For this design, you're going to want pixels, but if you're doing a print, you will want inches, millimeters, or centimeters, depending on what unit of measurement you use. You could also go down to create a design, and they have the Facebook cover all set up. I went ahead and set up my document, and this is the design we are going to be creating. You can also look through here and you can pick out a template that you like, but I just wanted to show how you can start from scratch and then you can create a completed design. There is no right or wrong way to create a design. This is the way that I personally use, but as you design more and get used to Canva's interface, you're going to find your own style. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off, I'm going to go to the Elements tab and I'm going to search for gym. And then I know that I want photos instead of graphics, so I'm going to click on the Photos tab. And I'm going to search and look through here. And I know that this is the image that I'm going to use. There are also other images that would be very interesting, like this weight one or that, or there's just so many that you can use. But when you are keeping in mind that you have an image where you want a lot of text on there, you're going to need a fair amount of negative space. And while this image doesn't look like it has a lot of negative space, you can manipulate it into working for your design. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop my image in there. And when I say keep in mind the negative space, I see some really good space right across the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enlarge it. Now, Canva has updated their website and they have done a really good job about having everything being enlarged proportionately. So I'm going to go ahead and enlarge it. And let's see. I like this, but I don't personally like to include faces in my designs. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I just sometimes think that they can be distracting. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over a little bit more so that the bikes kind of act as the center, or the row machines, I don't know what they are almost in the center. And I'm going to move that up a hair. And I'm going to stick with this layout. So I'm going to hit done, and as we can see, it's a very dark looking photo. And if we went ahead and put the text on top of it, you're not going to be able to see the text. So one trick that I have learned over the years is that if you go ahead and search square, and then you want to go to graphics, and you put a solid color over the top of it, preferably white, because it is easier to be seen when you make it more transparent. And then, like I said, we're going to mess with the transparency, which is also called opacity, and we're going to lower it down. And it just creates I'm probably going to go with 45. It creates a kind of blurry look over the top of the image, and it cuts down on the overall darkness of the photo. And this is a different look than if you were to mess with the actual settings of the photo, mess with the contrast and the light and the shadows and everything. And this is honestly quicker. I really like the way that's looking, and once we put the text on it, it's really going to pop. Now, what I always like to do before I start my design is I will type out all my information in a Word document so I can make sure everything is spelt correctly, and then I will create a second artboard or a second page, and I will go ahead and put the text in there so I can just copy and paste it. This will save you a whole bunch of time in case that you accidentally misspell something. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the text, and I'm going to make sure I'm clicked on here on the page or artboard that you are working with. I'm going to click add a heading. Now, typography kind of comes into play with this. You can always search Google for good font pairings on Canva, and you will have a whole bunch of different ideas for different pairings of fonts. So keeping that in mind, I know that when I look through here, I'm going to pick a font. I like League Spartan. And then I'm going to stretch the box this way so that it'll be all on one line. I'm going to copy and paste that into my text box. So now that I have this, I'm going to enlarge it. Now, when you enlarge stuff, you don't want to go like this because it can make it pixely looking. You want to get it as large as you want within the actual text size. I'm going to go probably with 72. And as you can see, it's on 2 lines. All you have to do is increase the width of your box. And I'm going to scooch it up. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you are doing a design is you want to look for natural grids within the composition or the picture or the image that you are using. And in here, I can see the floor of the gym, and that acts as a natural grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align the bottom of my text with the line right here. And it doesn't have to be exact, but you want to get it as close as possible, and then you can use your arrows on your keyboard to fine tune it. But I can see that I don't like how far it's going over here on the right hand side, so I'm going to smush it down just a little bit so that it can be right where I want it. So overall, I'm liking the layout of my Tom's Gym. Now we are going to go ahead and add a little bit of subheading, and I like to make my subheading a different font, and one font that I really like is Roberto. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste my address in here. And one thing I do not like is how smushed it is. So I'm going to decrease this overall size, and then I'm going to go ahead and increase the letter spacing of my design until I get a good spacing that I like. I'm going to go ahead and go with 132. Actually, I might go up to 138. There we go. I think that provides enough spacing in between the letters where it does not look too condensed. I like the overall size of it, and I'm going to go ahead and try to just eyeball it to align it with the edge of the T and the edge of the M. So let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and try to align it with the edge of the T and the edge of the M. And see, that's too big. I might go ahead and increase the spacing ever so much. Let's try 151. And then you're going to want to just get it to as close as you can. We're going to go back and fine tune the alignment. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of body to my design. I accidentally added it twice. And I'm going to keep consistent. You don't really want more than 2 or 3 fonts. I always stick with 2 because then it just looks too hodgepodgey. I'm going to change it to Roberto. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy my $10 a month. And I'm going to make it smaller than my element here to create hierarchy. I'm going to go down to maybe 14. And then you want to make it the same letter spacing. So I have 151 here. I'm going to change this to 151. And I'm going to change the color to red. And since I've been using this color palette, it automatically saves it. But if you are trying to find a color by eyeballing it, you can click on the little plus sign and you can choose the color you want. Or if you were to have a color palette that you were using, you can go ahead and copy and paste it into the bottom right here. So what I'm going to do is, my text box is way too large. I'm going to try to best align it to the T over here, just eyeballing it. And then I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to align it the best over here. Then I'm going to put the phone number in. And that is my design. And I can personally tell that it needs to be fine-tuned because it's not aligned correctly. So I'm going to go over to my elements, search for a line, and then I'm going to pop this line right in here. I'm going to change it into white, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And this is going to act as a makeshift grid on the side. And then I'm going to copy, and I'm going to line it on the right hand side with the M. As you can see, my stuff isn't aligned quite right. It needs to be moved over here. It's too far on the right, and it's also too far on the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to scooch it over, and I can see that it needs to be a little bit smaller. So let's see. This is the point where you can decide if you want to make it smaller, or what I like to do is I'm going to put the spacing down a little bit, and you'll have to change it down below, but that'll also help with getting it better aligned. So let's see. I'm going to finely tune it and scooch it with my arrows on my keyboard. I'm going to make it 146. And that can go over a hair to the left. And that looks pretty good. One thing I did notice is that I did not get this quite aligned to the bottom of the tile. So that is aligned correctly. And I'm going to go ahead, oops, I clicked on the wrong one. I'm going to go ahead and align this to the bottom a bit more. And then I'm going to move down here, and since I changed the spacing of this line, I'm going to go ahead and change the spacing of these down here, and then I'm going to align it left, and I'm also going to align this one right. Change it to 145. And then I'm going to align it so that the 8 is aligned with that white line on the right. And sometimes you have to click up to make sure that you are moving it. And then you can see that there is a faint line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align this a little bit lower to about right here. And then I'm going to match that on the left-hand side. And when you have it aligned, it'll also give you that dotted line. So since I know that it is aligned with the bottom of here, I'm going to scooch it over to line it with the left-hand side of this white line. And I think that that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these lines, and that is our new design. As a quick review, we created hierarchy by creating different sizes for the elements in the composition. We aligned everything to a grid, keeping in mind that there is actually a natural grid in this design, and we had it aligned correctly horizontally, and we also had it aligned correctly vertically because everything is aligned to the edge of the T and the edge of the M. And there's contrast in this design through the use of the transparency of the white rectangle and by adding an accent color for the information at the bottom. Now when you want to download your design, you're going to hit the arrow, and you can either use PNG or JPEG. I personally find that JPEG is easier because it is a smaller file size, whereas sometimes if you try to upload a PNG, it'll take forever and then it'll fail just because it is too large. And then you're going to select what page you want, and I'm going to select page 1, and then you can go ahead and download it, and then your design is done. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. It was a pretty simple tutorial. However, the next one is a little bit more complex, and I wanted you guys to be able to have a basic knowledge before we move on to the next tutorial. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. This one was fairly simple. The next tutorial is going to be about creating a flyer, and it's a little bit more complex, and we go ahead and move on to different design aspects. So you can go ahead and go on to the next tutorial.